The world is at crossroads as far as the safety and well-being of our ecosystem is concerned. With rampant urbanization, environmental degradation, and grave consequences of climate change, an overall path correction has become imperative to the existence of all living forms on Earth. Should we continue with the abuse of our precious natural resources? Should we use technology and innovation to conserve them? Can we reduce energy usage with a mindful approach and renewable sources? Dr. Prem Jain anticipated many such challenges we are facing today way back in the 70s. Over half a century of dedication and tireless efforts, he thought and spoke a language that was way ahead of its time. His passion and commitment to his Janmabhoomi and to his own mother ran equally deep.
From my earliest childhood, it's been ingrained with me that truth will always win, what we call Satyamev Jayate. She also gave us the love for all living creatures, trees and plants, the message of non-violence. And ever since my childhood, I've always respected that all life forms are equally important.
The last 10 years saw the culmination of his efforts by remarkably shaping the green movement in India, and his countless admirers began to refer to him as father of green buildings in India. The green revolution he started is the foundation of his legacy. In 2018, Prem Jain Memorial Trust was conceived to carry on his mission and founded upon his values, ideals and vision of a greener Bharat. Today, the Trust enjoys guidance of the best minds of the industry, champions of sustainability, corporate change makers and academicians. PJMT is set on its journey to create, establish and maintain sustainability directions through education, recognition and rewards that nurture future generations.
The best gift you can give to the person is educate him or her. Because then, wherever they are, they will be able to earn and flourish in life.
Each year begins with the Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, a week-long celebration of sustainability, and our annual flagship event, Prem Jain Memorial Address. The Trust organizes a spectrum of green initiatives which fill the week of January 26, Dr. Jain's birthday week. The Mahotsav is celebrated across the country with immense enthusiasm by Green Crusaders and our partner institutions through an array of sustainability-driven initiatives and activities. Having deep roots with Indian Green Building Council, the Trust has worked in tandem with IGBC and its chapters. PJMT takes great pride in partnering with esteemed partner societies, corporate leaders and premier universities across India, working closely with the common mission of creating a greener earth through the year. The Trust is a catalyst for sustainable research and development, sharing innovations and creating a global platform for exchange of thoughts and ideas to nurture future green ambassadors. PJMT has organized more than 300 green initiatives during Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav in association with its esteemed partner societies, corporates and institutions across India, and arranged over 300 online sessions by distinguished speakers and industry change makers on sustainable built environment with participation of more than 5,000 students and working professionals. At this edition of Harit Prem Bharat Mahotsav, we invite you to join this green revolution, to build a brighter tomorrow and change the world we will leave behind for our children. If we can change the way we think about buildings, maybe what we build will change the world.
All right. Good evening to all of you. Let me acknowledge the presence of Raj Rajaram. Yatin, if I may request you to transfer him to this side, that will help.
Yes,
because
sure.
he's also going to be speaking after we hear Greg Chick speak. To the rest of you, let me also acknowledge the presence of Amit Srivastava. You know, I'm not going to introduce him. You will see a profile of his coming up on the chat box, as well as of people like Mary Conley Eggert and Frank Slavonik. You will see all of that coming up soon. What I will say is this, that this is, a session that has taken us about a month to curate. And I must credit Mary Eggert also for sort of helping to see that we are able to invite Greg to come and speak to us, to share his perceptions on, not on any specific thing, but on how each of us can get into the other person's space and mind and head and work this whole situation on how we beat the challenges of sustainability with changes that we make in our own lives. I keep telling people, touch your heart and tell me of some 10, 15 things that we need to be doing. How many of them do you do? And, you know, one half the time, I realize that either we are not being honest with ourselves, or, well, we want to say these things because a whole lot of them today are beginning to make a living out of sustainability as green professionals go. Am I being cynical? Am I being a genuine believer? I don't have an answer. Well, we have about 25 people here today, just now, and I know the numbers will climb up. We have had about 300 registrations. I must tell you that, Yatin Malik says so. And Greg Chick, what I would recommend we do is this. It's 6:09, another minute to go. 6:10, let's say you start. Take your time. I will leave it to you, as I said, as to how you want to take this. Maybe you want to stop, pause, get people to talk. There are lots of people I've invited. As a matter of fact, there is also the CEO of one of South Asia's largest and most prestigious industrial clusters. It's called LCETA, the Electronic City Association, something or the other in India. And, those guys are also going to be here. I mean, this guy is going to be here, but he said he's got some meeting and he will join us soon enough. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Singh and Ravindra Singh. So I'm saying that we have got Raj, we have got a whole lot of other people who can engage. And my request to you all of you out there in the attendees list now, you want to speak, Yatin Malik will give you audio, or my personal recommendation would be write into the chat box. I see, Upendra Ravalji, namaskar to you. I know you can't speak, but you are another person from Surat, from Gujarat he is, and he will also be, I'm sure, willing to engage at some point. Ravalji, if you do want to speak, put it on the chat box, your request to be on the video format, and I will request Yatin Malik to sort of take you in. Before we start there, Greg, with Greg, Mary, do you want maybe 30, 40 seconds to say something before we get Greg to speak and to take the floor?
Well, I am just thrilled to be here, Hari, and Payal, thank you for sustaining the Prem Jain Memorial Trust and allowing for these wonderful speakers to come forward. Two very accomplished authors are with us today, and I am so excited that their books are available on Amazon to educate us on all about water, but also all about climate change and how we navigate. Right. So both have also been very strong contributors to our Global Waterworks movement, which enables all in the world to see that water does work when we work together and apply the leading technologies. So I don't want to take any more time from these speakers, and just will be here to provide some visuals for Greg, and then we can also provide a visual on Raj's book. But so I am standing by, just eager to hear more and learn from both of them. Thank you, Hari and Payal.
Thank you, Mary. Water does work when we work together. Greg Chick, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Hari, and thank you, everyone here. I have a thing with the big picture, and at times my big picture can even make it difficult for me to make a point to somebody who is in a not big picture state of mind. they hear me and kind of get lost and say, well, Greg, cut to the chase, or what's the return on investment on that? And it gets a little frustrating, but it's the big picture that matters, because the details are just like the laundry work that we have to do on a daily basis, but we have to know why we need to do that laundry. But I'd like to start with something kind of like an essence of how I came about in this thought set. I was maybe 5 years old. My mother would drop me off at the beach. Sounds silly, but back then in the 50s, it was okay. And we lived in Los Angeles on the beach there. And she would drop me off at the beach, and I would stay there all day playing in the sand while she worked. And then when she got done, she would pick me up. And one day I said to her when she came, I said, where does all this sand come from? And she says, like, what do you mean? And well, does somebody, I didn't know. I was a little kid. And she says, oh, well, I get your question. It's just rocks. They wear out, and then the water washes constantly and refines the rocks down to a fine sand. And I says, well, the first thing that came to my head was, well, if it keeps doing that, the sand going to disappear? And she kind of laughed and says, no, well, that doesn't happen. And well, actually, it kind of does. It becomes dissolved solids. But then I said, well, what happens to the water if it wears out? And this is my point. It was the assumption that the water won't wear out. And technically, maybe it won't. But will it get polluted to the point of not being able to be used? That's a little leap here in my connection of my message. But yes, the water can wear out. And when you have the burden of asking those kinds of questions, it's a little odd, but that's kind of where I started asking these kinds of questions. And when I spent time at these plumbing code council meetings, there was all this talk. Let's go back to like 1990. Everybody was changing the gallons per flush on the toilet, the requirement. And pardon my American disposition on gallons versus liters, but everybody was screaming and yelling about the toilet. And I just said, well, wait a minute. 70% of our water consumption is wasted outside in the yard. To use the saying, there's the elephant in the room. Well, the elephant isn't in the room. He's outside. He's in the yard, and he's stepping all over the landscape, and it's all the water we're wasting. And the reply I got was a bit odd to me at the time. It kind of threw me off. They said, well, that's not the plumbing code. We're here for building codes and water conservation, not landscapers. And that's outside. What my point is here is that it wasn't convenient for the technology at hand, and the authority having jurisdiction, the plumbing code, couldn't grasp soil science or water efficiency for inappropriately planted non-native adaptive plants outside the building, or that American right to the American dream of a big, perfect lawn. Everybody assumed that was a given. That was the bubble, the comfort bubble we lived in of course you got to have a lawn. Kids got to have a place to play. And I didn't see it that way. I had been doing drip irrigation, micro irrigation on avocados and landscape. And I kind of felt not really part of the conversation. So anyway, the toilet manufacturers were leading the corporate interest, the dialogue. And they said, well, the toilet uses 27% of the water. And not being a math guy, I just took their word for it. And what they meant in their own interest was it uses 27% of the indoor water, just the water indoors. And that's the building code, and that's the plumbing code, and that was their axe to grind, and that was their claim. If they could claim they're 27% of the water, then they're a big portion. They're the largest slice of the pie. I was trying to say that they're not the largest slice of the pie. They're funding this whole water conservation thing, and everyone's selling these new toilets. And I'm trying to say, wait a minute. It's really, if we want to oversimplify this, we can say that indoor uses half the water and outdoor uses the other half. That's giving everybody an equal chance here, but 70% of the water we use is outdoors or agriculture. But anyway, the toilets became required by code, and there was the conversation, hey, wait a minute, they can't tell me what I could put in my house. This is my house. This is my water. I pay for it. I pay for that water. So they have nothing to say about that. And this was the conversation for a while. And therein got the dichotomy of my right and my comfort bubble and my dream and my lawn and my dog and my kids. And as I think it was John Lennon saying, I, my, me, mine. Or was that George Harrison? But anyway, a Beatle. The thing was that water conservation was driven at first, in my experience here in America, by the toilet manufacturers claiming to be the key to 27% of the water. And the terminology and lingo and the formulas and the certifications and things were, labeled somewhat, green or this or that. It kind of took the industry for a spin, because the toilets that they mandated didn't really flush well. That was the first black eye in the green movement that I saw. And this black eye became an objection tool to any effort to sustain and improve the water industry. They're like, yeah, right, you're going to do another toilet thing. We'll have to flush twice. You greenie weenies, you're not very bright, are you? This kind of a thing. And there was a resistance to change. But it wasn't the resistance to the specific toilet. It was a resistance to the state of mind. And I think that state of mind is what I'll just maybe inappropriately call the ambiguous thing we're discussing here, which is the comfort bubble that the human state of mind wants to live in, and to work hard to earn the strength, the money, and the power to secure that bubble. And while it's good to be human and alive, and bubbles are very comfortable, I'm sitting on a nice soft chair and I have a microphone because it makes it easy, and I have a earphone here. It makes it easy for me because I'm hearing challenged. But the mindset of this sustainable going green and whatnot does challenge the status quo, and it is a mindset difference. And I think that is something that we can work on. Anybody have any reflections on that specific kind of point of view?
I think the sense of community that you're talking about, Greg, is so important. We are all in our own selfish bubbles. And as long as I have water, I don't care. If my neighbor doesn't have water, or if a poor person in my community is drinking dirty water, that attitude has to change. And unless we get this idea into young people's minds that we are all in one community called the global community or a local community, it is our community we have to be concerned about, and not just what I have and I am happy with me and my family. That has to go if we have to survive in this age of climate change. Thank you.
You know,
Yeah.
Greg, I think your point on, and Raj, your point on about community, but you know, I always used to use when I would be giving maybe a presentation in front of a sales meeting or something, I'd always use the example of an aspirin. What would you pay for an aspirin? And so, same thing with water, right? You're going to laugh at this, Greg. So it said, what would you pay for an aspirin if your friend across the street had a headache? Not very much, right? What would you pay for an aspirin if you had a headache? Well, a little bit more. What would you pay for an aspirin if your doctor told you you needed to take an aspirin every day, you're going to have a heart attack and die? Value of the aspirin just went up, right? It's the same thing with water that you touched on there, Greg and Raj, is we need to bring this home. Bring it inside of the bubble if that people are living in, because it's right, for the most part, they think about it, it's not their problem. And part of that, a little bit of that is head in the sand ignorance, because they're not really looking at, maybe they haven't tested what's coming out of their tap or what's down in the future, and what's going on with the source water that is the source for their drinking water and so forth. So definitely that is, you framed the challenge, I think.
Well, thank you, Frank. You know, to that point you made about the aspirin, that is absolutely spot on. Here, my experience, and part of the driving thing that drives me nuts, it seems, for decades as a plumber, people, when I would be there for, say, just optionally changing out a faucet or something, and I'd say, oh boy, you need these shutoff valves down here done, and I checked your water pressure and it's way too high, you need a regulator. And they say, oh, well, how much is that? And I said, well, $350 for the regulator, and these angle stops would be $100. Oh, no, we're happy with the faucet. And they bought a pretty faucet. It looks like the new trendy thing with the gooseneck, and it has the right finish on it. And because, the holidays are coming, they want the kitchen to look nice. They thought that at the time the pressure regulator was too expensive. And then what happens is, the following Sunday before Christmas or whatever, the high pressure blows the regulator out. The supply tubes blow off or whatever. And now all of a sudden, that is more important even than their high-speed cell signal. And so I get there, and they're willing to pay. All of a sudden, they're willing to pay almost anything. It's like, if you have a headache. When people realize that they don't have the water, that water itself isn't the bubble. That water is part of the comfort that the bubble provides. And being the comfort creature, they're willing to do what they want to get the water back on, but that's all. They're not interested in, well, will this regulator last for 10 years? Whatever. And they're very short-sighted, and therein fuels the story of the book, Mike and Mac. Their last name is Rowe, and Mike Rowe is in the micro mind, and macro is in the macro mind. And the macro guy, he's a kind of a sustainable green guy. And Mac, he's super trendy. I'm sure he has a nice faucet. And the two mindsets, and it's not really mine to criticize the micro. That's not my point. And it's not really to alarm, to be an alarmist. But I think if the story can be told in a third party, like a book, it's not as threatening. It's like a comedian.